Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to our Facebook Live on Masking Your Soul Conversations. And I'm Anumani, your modern day shaman. And today my special guest is Kim Korven. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Anumani. How are you?
Good. She's visiting us from Canada, and we're going to give her a moment to speak. But I'm going to introduce her first and read a little bit of her bio and then let her get started. So Kim Korven helps people experience peace at a profound level. She used to think she did so because she's an attorney and a collaborative dispute resolution practitioner. Now she knows the opposite is true. Kim was attracted to dispute resolution because helping people experience real peace and the confidence that comes from this is what she's on this earth to share. Kim has a coaching and collaborative dispute resolution practice in Regina, Canada. She specializes in helping families create legacies of peace in the areas of divorce and estate planning. She started this after she created a peaceful path to divorce with her first husband. She saved the family money and lots of stress. Her children are healthy and happy because of how Kim transformed the process of divorce for her family. Kim's children are aged 17 and 12. They're active in musical endeavors. Kim lives with them, her second husband, and their rescue greyhounds and cats. She has a good relationship with her former spouse, so it is a peace-filled and happy family. And that's so wonderful, Kim. Thank you for being on our segment today. Welcome.
Well, thank you for asking me. This is a real thrill. A real thrill. So, because spreading the word of peace, that's one of my joys. And then I really love interacting with you. So
wonderful. And I love interacting with you. And I want to start by having you tell people a little bit about where you live for people who haven't been to that part of the country.
So I live in Saskatchewan, and the community I live in is called Regina, and there's about 250,000 people, about 4 hours north of Williston, North Dakota. So originally, every single tree here was planted, and it's a land of extreme climate. We can get down to 40 below in winter and over 100 in the summer. So, wonderful. And it's actually, as we were talking, I know all my neighbors. I quite often forget to lock my back door. And here I am admitting that, and I'll be in trouble with my family because I'm supposed to enforce that. But, you know, it's just, it's a good neighborhood, and yeah, I like it.
And what is your favorite thing about where you live?
I think it's the people. The people here are, and I mean, I've traveled around the world. There's a kindness and also a no nonsense, right? Like, we're farm folk pretty much, and we do not suffer fools. but we help our neighbors, like that real kindness, and the fact that when you live in a climate like this, you have to be prepared to help, or you don't survive. So it's a really neat mixture.
That's wonderful. So let's start with some of the questions. And the question I always ask all of my guests, the first one is to talk about what your definition of soul is. This program is called Unmasking Your Soul, and it's based on my book. And we're going to get more into your own unmasking, but let's start with what your definition is of soul.
So, you know, I had never thought this through before I met you. And I realized my definition of soul, it's akin to a kernel of wheat that's lying dormant in each of us. Now, wheat, I grew up on a farm. Wheat can sit, if it's dry, for many, many years without growing. It needs the right conditions to grow. And I think that's like our souls as well. Our souls connect us to the divine. And I think that connection only comes when we're ready, when the conditions exist for us for that to blossom in us, much like a kernel of wheat.
That's beautiful. I love that. And I always think about what are the things that I can do to nourish my soul, which I love what you're talking about, because our soul does need to blossom and be nourished. So I love that. So I know you have gone through your own journey, and now you're a lawyer and mediator, and really you have your core foundation around really helping people build peace in their lives. So tell us about your journey of unmasking and how you became who you are today.
It's quite an interesting journey, because I think back when I was a teenager, I was very nasty, and I competed in judo, and I had basically the death stare that I would use on my opponents that would help me win match after match. So I was this physical warrior, and you better not have messed with me. And there were people who discovered to their peril, right? So I had quite a temper, and I used to think that my temper was going to make me really hurt somebody sometime, and it didn't. But that's kind of where I started, right? And it seems so bizarre now. I can't even do the death stare anymore. But and also, I guess I started on the farm, which I had lots of experience with nature, and I drove combines and grain trucks, and I did it, and I thought I had to be perfect at everything. But looking back on it, it sure was not nurturing my soul. I'm not real good at that, those kind of mechanical pursuits, but I love my time in nature. And
I cannot imagine you with a temper again.
I know. Like you look at me, and even when I'd been out of judo for about 10 years, I was working in a remote community, and they had a jujitsu club. And one of my coworkers encouraged me to go and work out with them. So I showed up in my sweats, and I was doing randori, which is fighting, with this man who outweighed me by 100 pounds. And I threw him really hard on the mat, just boom. And he looked shocked, and I was shocked too, because I'm thinking, I thought that killer instinct was gone, and it's not. So, but I still, though, like I coach little kids in judo still, and it's I don't put up with a lot of crap, I'll tell you that. But they know I really like them, and we have lots of fun, and we work on fundamentals, and I work on teaching them the main principles of judo, which is maximum efficiency and minimum effort, and mutual welfare and benefit. So although it sounds like a contradiction that I started with judo and being this real warrior, this physical, nasty warrior, actually it contains the seeds of who I am today, this peacemaker.
So talk a little bit about, was judo something that helped you shift into the person you are today? And you said you had a temper. Was that part of the mask that you were wearing?
I don't think it was a mask at the time. It's who I was and where I was. And I mean, I was bullied in high school, and so judo was actually a really good way of staying sane. The other good thing about judo is it gave me a community, and it also really taught me self-discipline. And I really, really like those principles. And it's a mental game, and that always really appealed to me. The other thing about judo is it was the first opportunity, the first time my soul was sprinkled with rain, so to speak, was in judo. And I was 15 years old. I was going to the national championships for the first time in my age group, right? So it was called cadets. And it was a week before the national championships, and a coach who I really respected, we're setting up for a tournament. And he says, out of the blue, we're expecting you to come home with a medal. And I'm looking behind me. Who are you talking to? And there was no one behind me. It was me he was talking to. And I didn't see that in me. And so, and when I competed in judo, I would always win. It was the same MO. I'd use the death stare. The match would start. I'd throw a throw called taitoshi and then into a hold down. And that's how I won every single match until I got to those national championships. And I remember the one match I had, my opponent stepped in a throw on me, and I quite unconsciously countered. To this day, I couldn't tell you the name of the throw I used, but it was the only time in my competitive career where I got a full point for a throw. And it was just this natural expression of the divine, essentially. So it was, and I mean, and it's 35 years later, and I still remember that. But it was that first experience of connecting to the divine.
That's beautiful. So talk about, was there a particular mask that was difficult for you to let go of, or one that you recall you were wearing as you were going through your journey?
I think the most difficult mask, I think, was the good girl. I had to be perfect at everything I did. I got married, I had 2 kids, and I was being basically the farm housewife. I had a big garden, and I was canning, and I was a lawyer and a mom. And that perfection, right? What I thought I had to be was an incredibly difficult mask to overcome. And even part of it was this perfection. I'd made this decision to marry this individual. I married him. I wasn't happy, but I stayed because I had made the commitment. Part of that whole mask.
Yeah, the good girl is definitely one that I can resonate with. Feeling that I needed to be perfect. And for all of us, I think our childhood experiences, the things we hear said to us, all begin to affect and go into our subconscious, and then we have to work through that and let go of those masks. So was there a pivotal moment in your life where you knew that you had to do something different and you needed to stop wearing that mask?
And this is going to sound, I guess, really, really quite harsh. And for people who have not gone through divorce, may not recognize this and may think, whoa, she's still a killer. But people who I've talked to since, who've felt stuck in a relationship that's not working, have all had similar thoughts. So that's why I'm going to share it. But I remember thinking that I wished my spouse would get killed in an accident. Because I thought, well, that will be, I thought that's going to be the best solution. And I remember sharing that with an elderly friend of mine, and she just looked at me and said, oh. And I said to her, is that bad? I was so twisted, I didn't recognize just how completely horrible that was. And she nodded her head yes. And that's when I started to realize that I really was in a bad space, and I needed to find a more positive solution. That solution, that what I had thought of as a solution, was actually creating a whole other problem, not just for me, but for my kids, and at a soul level, right? It wasn't soul affirming.
So as you started to remove that mask, what did you start to see happening in your life?
Well, I started to get stronger, and more sure of who I am. And it was less about, and conversely, at the same time, it was less about me. I really realized that children love their parents no matter what. And so I committed to that kind of an outcome. And I also, like, I remember there was a month where I really tried to make it work as if it was all me. And it made me realize sometimes people just aren't good together. And you're better off living apart. And I remember I committed not to me and the kids, but I committed to my children having the best possible relationship with their dad. So it wasn't about me at all. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. And it really, really transformed and helped me get out from behind that mask that I'd been wearing. And also the whole good girl and the perfection. Well, to contemplate divorce, you see yourself as a failure. So it really made me come face to face with that.
Yeah, and I, having gone through my own divorce, I know that the all the thoughts that come into your head about all the things you did wrong, and it takes some time to heal. But certainly, I love what you're doing to help people come to a place of peace, right? Because a lot of divorces don't end in peace, and a lot of difficulty between the parties, and especially when there's children involved. So, can you talk a little bit more about that, and what you're doing now to help with that process of bringing more peace into divorce?
Well, the traditional approach to divorce is based on I'm wonderful and you're horrible, of course. And that's how you win.
Mhm.
It's not mutual welfare and benefit at all. And what it does is this is somebody you've loved. And to win, you're not acknowledging any of the positive. It's just the negative. And it really right, it's a space that takes a person a long time to recover from. So I actually, and the other thing is, of course, it's conflict that really harms children. And I look at my children, and their dad and I, we didn't fight, but there was tension, lots and lots of tension in the house. And our daughter was really withdrawn, and our son was acting out. And I look at them now, and because their father, when I asked him to leave, I didn't say, you're a jerk or anything. I said, we're not bringing out the best in each other. And our children deserve us setting a better example. And I want them to have the best relationship possible with you. So can you please leave? So, there was no blame and shame. And we each were allowed to keep our dignity. And that's what I do when I work with people, is I help them acknowledge the good, because you're grieving. It's the death of a relationship and you need to grieve. So much like a eulogy, yeah, we acknowledge that, we set goals, but it's dignity. And it's acknowledging that this other person brings something to the children that you don't, right? So together, you can be much more effective parents than if you're like this. So, and so some of my clients I actually coach. Here's how you communicate with this person, and let's work through. Other times I do mediation with couples. Sometimes it's, I'm your lawyer. So and I guess the other thing I'm realizing is part of it is my voice. creates a sense of calm and peace. But I don't judge. I'm very curious. And each one of us has issues. Each one of us faces challenges. We don't always see them. And that's what makes us so beautiful and alive, really. And I really enjoy people. So it's a combination of those skills and who I am. And as you said in the bio, like I used to think, oh, it's my legal training, my mediation training. That's why I'm like this. And it's just recently I've realized, no, it's quite the opposite. I was attracted to those disciplines because of who I am. And then that early exposure to Judo with maximum efficiency and minimum effort and mutual welfare and benefit. So.
Well, I can say that I know it must be refreshing for the folks that you work with, right? That you're not trying to pin one against the other, but instead bringing some peace into the conversations and how they manage the whole process. And especially when there's kids involved, that's so important.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing such important work in the world. We need, yes, we need more of this. So I'm sure you've seen, different masks worn from the people that you've worked with and in your field of law. Can you talk a little bit about that, of the masks that you've seen worn and perhaps how I'm sure you're helping people take their masks off as they're going through the process of going through the divorce.
Well, I mean, I see different people wearing different masks, okay? Like I used to think as a lawyer, I had to go to court and be an advocate that way. And it didn't, yeah, I could make the good arguments but it didn't feel essential, authentic to me. I see people wearing the victim mask, wearing the persecutor mask, some of my clients. And I also see people wearing the mask of, I'm going to be strong. I'm not going to let my feelings show. Or the mask of fear. My world is ending. What am I going to do? So, those are some of the masks I encounter.
So can you talk a little bit about some of the tips and advice you would give people, right, that may be going through a divorce or thinking about a divorce, and how can they start to prepare themselves? How can they begin to unmask themselves so that the process is a better process and a more peaceful process for them?
I think, I've actually on my website, the people can sign up. I did a 7-video course I shot real quick, dirty. So it isn't fancy, but it contains some of this information. Starting out with a commitment to your children, with a commitment to peace, and recognizing that peace isn't this abstract passive. Peace is an active. You've got to be active to achieve peace. And it really helps to start with that goal with your children, right? And understanding that children love both parents, and that children, they have enough love for both of you. And they may not like your behavior, but they're always going to love you. So let's set up for the best relationship possible between your children and the other parent. I think another really important first step is to figure out what people can afford and to plan it. Because the statistics I've read for Western Canada, the average divorce costs a couple about $40,000. So for people, if that's understood at the beginning, and you don't want to spend $40,000 between your family, it makes you to be more creative and more open to other options, other approaches. Something else is, if you can continue to talk to your spouse directly, is a really good thing. Because in any collaborative dispute resolution process, that communication is key. And one last piece of advice that I love, when I heard it when I was going through my separation, it just transformed everything. And that is, your spouse isn't going to change just because you're not together. Right? So your spouse, what that means is your spouse isn't acting in a certain way to make you angry. Your spouse is acting the way he is because that's who he is. And it has nothing to do with you. It's not about you. It's just an indication of why you're not together. And I mean, and 10 years later, sometimes my spouse still pushes my buttons, and I'm sure I still push his buttons. And I always stop myself and go, Kim, there's a reason you're not together. Just breathe. So there you go.
And what would be one tip that you would give people in terms of how you were able to let go of your mask of the good girl? Is there something that stands out that you started doing that helped support you in that?
There's a few things I did. And one was, I hadn't worked out in Judo for 25 years because when I couldn't be perfect as a competitor, I ran away from it and I started traveling and I never went back, right? Other than that time when I threw that guy at the jiu-jitsu club. So it just so happened when my marriage wasn't in good shape, I ran into my former judo coach and he told me he was going to start a club. And I said, hey, do you need any help? And he said, well, just at the beginning, middle, and end of every practice, Kim. So I went back to judo and I had forgotten how much joy it brought me. And I think it was finding that joy again that really made me start to think of losing that mask. And once again, it was nourishment for this kernel of soul in me. And the other thing I did when I went to law school, I had this dream in my last year of law school about obtaining my master's. And I never did it. I lost confidence and thought I wasn't good enough, and I wasn't perfect. And I remember when I was married and our son was little, I got a letter saying, come and do your master's. You can become a prof, right? We need profs. And I talked to my husband about it then, and he said, no, we'd have to move and we're settled here. And I went along with it. That was part of being a good girl, right? You just go along with what, to keep the peace, a different kind of peace than I practice now, right? But so after the marriage, we separated. This dream of doing my master's came up again. And it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. I took a leave of absence from my job, and I took my kids, and I took my greyhounds, and we moved. So I could fulfill this dream. And it was the most fantastical thing. Because it really proved to me, I mean, I'd been out of university for 15 years then. And I recall the first couple of weeks in taking a legal theory class, and it took me an hour to read 6 pages. And there I was in tears, wondering, oh my Lord, what have I done? I'm not good enough for this. I can't do this. And I remembered my grandmother had gone back to university and got her teaching degree when she'd been older than me. And I remembered that. And so I just said to myself, be gentle with yourself, Kim. If she did it, you can. And, so it was a different, completely different vision of perfection, which allowed the mask to, allowed me to start removing that mask and figuring out who I am. Because the other thing that was so neat about that was everything fell into place, the money, where we lived. And it was such an expression of soul and connection to the divine in action. And I still just, it takes my breath away.
I love that. And yes, I think it's so important for us not to ever give up on our dreams. But a lot of what you said resonated with me. Really, the theme around doing the things that make your heart sing. When I was also going through my divorce, I had always loved art and music as a kid, but it's kind of like I had given it all up. And after my divorce, I remember calling up my mom and saying, Mom, do you still have my guitar? And she's like, yes, and getting it back and starting to play again and doing artwork, which turned into more than what I thought. But it was so opening of my heart and my soul, because it was something I really love to do. And so that's a good reminder for all of those listening to really do the things that bring you joy, that really make your heart sing, because that helps you in the process of unmasking your soul. So,
That is so true. And it's so funny, as kids, we do things that bring us joy, and then we become adults. And as an adult, I must be serious, and I must, this strange notion about giving up what brings us joy.
yeah. So I'm all for returning back to joy and setting that affirmation with everyone who's watching us to really pay attention to that, because that's going to help you through your process of unmasking. And so, Kim, how can people connect with you?
Well, and because I'm in a regulated industry, what I've actually done, I have my practice here, and then I have this vision that I would love to see the paradigm of divorce be transformed from this conflict and misery to this dignity and peace, right? Where it can help their souls blossom. And so what I did was I prepared the sayings for a MindPT session. So MindPT is an app. So it's the word mind and then capital P, capital T. And there are these wonderful sessions where they scroll through images, 1,000 images, and 200 of them have sayings on them to prime your brain for peace. And you can watch them in as little as 5 minutes. So it bypasses the conscious brain and gets to the subconscious brain. So if you go to MindPT, there's actually, I prepared a session, and it's called The Gift of Divorce. So the is part of it, The Gift of Divorce. And that name is taken because I really believe that divorce can be the best gift you give your children. So if you're thinking about separating or you're in the process, buy the session. The app is free. The session, I think, is about $47 or $48 US. But then it's something you have, and it actually has my website contact there. So like I mentioned, that video course. So if you want the video course, then you can find it. But I thought this is a nice gift if you're on the fence, if you're not sure where you are. It's not, it's a small cash outlay. And I would really like to see, as I say, to help transform this whole this whole area really needs it. Our whole world needs it. Because can you imagine, Anumani, if we had children that weren't being subjected to conflict,
Yes.
what that would do for our world?
Yes, definitely would make it a much more beautiful and loving world, and we certainly need that. So I will put that URL underneath the video when we're done
Okay.
here, so people can click on it as well, and I'll put your website.
Well, thank you.
Yes, and so we leave everyone with this thought of, that the gift of peace, the gift of divorce. And I remind everyone that you are loved, that you are loved. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week on Monday. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Anumani.
Bye.
Bye-bye.